milk on tap, cracked nipples, and zero respect. Welcome to life as a wet nurse in Victorian London, where your body wasn't your own and neither was your dignity. The year is 1853, and Olivia Keating has just given birth to her third child. Unlike her previous two babies who died before their first birthdays, a tragically common occurrence in Victorian London, this one seems healthy. But there's no time for maternal bonding, not when the aristocracy needs her mammary glands more than her own infant does. Mrs. Keating, you've got a splendid milk supply, announces the physician, poking at her engorged breasts like they're melons at a market stall. Lady Pemberton on Belgrave Square requires a wet nurse immediately. Her newborn refuses the pap boat, and she simply cannot be expected to feed the child herself. Why not, you ask? Because Victorian upper-class women were considered far too delicate and refined to breastfeed their own babies. That's what poor women with abundant milk supplies were for. Never mind that Olivia has her own child. That's what her mother or sister could handle while she was busy lactating for pounds sterling. The physician pays £18 per annum, with room and board. The physician continues, already writing up her recommendation. You'll need to pass the health inspection, of course. Can't have diseased milk poisoning the future heir of the Pemberton estate. The health inspection involved being stripped naked while a male doctor examined every inch of her body for signs of syphilis, tuberculosis, or moral degeneracy. Because obviously, a woman's character flaws could taint her breast milk. Science. No alcohol, no spicy foods, no sexual relations with your husband. The doctor rattles off as Olivia tries not to die of embarrassment. Your milk must remain pure for your employer's child. And just like that, Olivia joins the ranks of London's wet nurses, women whose bodies literally became food production facilities for the offspring of the wealthy. Upon arrival at the Pemberton mansion, Olivia is immediately reminded of her place in the household hierarchy. Somewhere between the scullery maid and the family dog. You'll sleep in the nursery, instructs Mrs. Figgins, the household manager. You must be available whenever young Master George requires nourishment, day or night. But when can I see my own baby? Olivia dares to ask. Mrs. Figgins raises an eyebrow that could freeze the Thames in August. Your contract allows one half-day visit every fortnight. Consider yourself fortunate. Most wet nurses are allowed far less. And this was true. Many wet nurses were completely separated from their own infants for the duration of their employment, which could last up to 3 years. Their own babies were often fed dangerous substitutes like sugar water, pap, bread soaked in milk or water, or infant's preservative, which often contained opium to keep the babies quiet. No wonder infant mortality rates were sky-high. Olivia's day begins at 4 a.m. when little Master George first stirs. She must respond immediately, regardless of her own exhaustion. By mid-morning, her nipples are already cracked and bleeding. A common occupational hazard, along with mastitis and breast abscesses that could turn fatal in pre-antibiotic Victorian London. Can't you do something about that incessant humming? Lady Pemberton asks one afternoon, catching Olivia singing softly to George as he feeds. I beg your pardon, my lady. I was just... You're not here to form attachments, Lady Pemberton interrupts coldly. You're here to provide nourishment. Nothing more. This was perhaps the cruelest irony of the wet nurse's existence. Being physically intimate with a child they were forbidden from emotionally bonding with. Heaven forbid they should grow to love the babies at their breasts. George seems quite fond of you, observes Lord Pemberton one evening, watching his son contentedly nursing. Quite the natural maternal instinct you have. Olivia keeps her eyes downcast, aware that wet nurses who attracted too much attention from the man of the house often found themselves in impossible situations. Many wet nurses were dismissed without references for inappropriate behavior, which could mean anything from letting the baby cry too long to rebuffing unwanted advances. For all their supposed concern about a wet nurse's moral character, Victorian employers seemed remarkably comfortable with the hypocrisy of forcing these women to abandon their own babies while nourishing another's. "Mrs. Keating, what's this I hear about you sneaking your own child into the servants' quarters?" demands Mrs. Figgins 6 months into Olivia's employment. "Please, ma'am, my baby isn't thriving. My sister can't afford proper milk. And, if you cannot abide by the terms of your employment, we shall find someone who will. Your milk belongs exclusively to Master George now." And there it was, the fundamental truth of the wet nurse's existence. Her body was no longer her own. It was a commodity to be bought and sold, with the wealthy claiming exclusive rights to its production. Medical doctrine of the time insisted that a wet nurse's milk was specifically designed for the baby she was currently feeding, meaning that if she fed 2 babies, she would somehow magically produce 2 different types of milk. This absurd belief was used to justify forbidding wet nurses from nursing their own infants, even during visits home. When Master George begins teething, Olivia's suffering reaches new heights. "Merciful heavens!" gasps Martha, a housemaid who walks in on Olivia examining her ravaged nipples. "That looks worse than when the butcher's dog got into the meat hooks." "It's not so bad," Olivia lies, dabbing at the blood with a cloth. Victorian wet nurses had all manner of folk remedies for sore nipples, from applying beef tea to bathing them in brandy. None worked particularly well. "I heard Mrs. Hornsby's wet nurse tried to supplement with a feeding tube when her nipples got too bad," Martha whispers. "They sacked her on the spot, said she was cheating them out of their money's worth." Meanwhile, Olivia's own baby grows increasingly ill from improper nourishment. During her fortnightly visit home, she finds the infant pale and listless. "Can't you express some milk to leave behind?" her sister pleads. They check the volume before and after each feeding. Olivia explains, tears streaming. "If they suspect I'm diverting even a drop," she doesn't need to finish the sentence. "Without her wages, her entire family would starve." The true perversity of the situation becomes painfully clear when Lady Pemberton hosts her monthly ladies' social. "My George is thriving splendidly on his wet nurse's milk," Lady Pemberton boasts to her friends. "I interviewed 12 candidates before finding one with appropriately nutritious milk and a docile temperament." "How fortunate," replies another lady. "Mine developed an attitude after 6 months. Actually had the audacity to request time to visit her own child's grave." The conversation continues while Olivia stands in the corner, holding Master George and pretending not to hear them discuss her biological functions, as if she were a prized dairy cow. "I've heard the lower classes don't form the same attachments to their offspring as we do," offers a particularly odious guest. "It's nature's way of preparing them for high infant mortality, I suppose." Olivia bites her tongue so hard she tastes blood. Later that night, when she's finally alone in the nursery, she allows herself a moment of rebellion. "Your mother couldn't be bothered to feed you herself," she whispers to the sleeping infant. "But I sacrificed my own child to feed you. Remember that when you grow up to be just like her." When Master George reaches his first birthday, a milestone Olivia's own baby didn't live to see, the Pembertons throw an elaborate celebration. "We must acknowledge your contribution to George's robust health," Lord Pemberton tells Olivia, presenting her with a small brooch, "a token of our appreciation." The brooch is worth perhaps 1/10 of what they spent on the birthday cake alone. A month later, Master George is ready to be weaned, and Olivia's services are no longer required. After 15 months of lending her body to the Pemberton family, she is dismissed with her final wages and a reference letter. "You may find employment with the Wilkinsons on Cadogan Place," Mrs. Figgins informs her. "They're expecting twins next month and will require a wet nurse with abundant supply." And so the cycle begins again. Another family, another baby or babies, to suckle while her own children grow up without her. if they survive at all. As Olivia packs her meager belongings, Lady Pemberton appears in the doorway with Master George in her arms. "Say goodbye to Nurse Keating, George," she coos. The toddler buries his face in his mother's shoulder, suddenly shy. "He's developed such a strong attachment to me," Lady Pemberton says proudly. "That's the problem with wet nurses who stay too long. Children get confused about who their real mother is." Olivia curtsies deeply, swallowing the bitter irony. After giving this child her body, her milk, her time, and indirectly, her own baby's life, she remains nothing more than a temporary feeding vessel, easily replaced and quickly forgotten. "I wish you and Master George every happiness, my lady," she says, the perfect picture of servile gratitude. As she walks out the servants' entrance for the final time, her breasts still leaking milk for a child who no longer needs her, Olivia reflects on the peculiar cruelty of her profession. In Victorian London, a wet nurse was expected to provide the most intimate form of nourishment while remaining emotionally detached, to sacrifice her own child's well-being for a stranger's baby, and to be simultaneously essential and invisible. Just another day in the milk mines of Victorian London, where the only thing that flowed more abundantly than breast milk was the audacity of the wealthy who believed they could purchase not just a woman's labor, but her bodily functions and maternal instincts as well. And the final indignity? After years of service, these women's stretched and sagging breasts made them less desirable as wives and less employable as domestic servants. Their reward for feeding the next generation of aristocrats was often poverty and scorn. Because nothing said "thank you for your service" in Victorian England quite like being discarded the moment your mammary glands ran dry.